to the property unexpected. And normally I probably would not be very welcoming of someone just showing up on my property, as I've mentioned before, but this individual came with some information that I needed. And so I'm very thankful that they showed up, even if it was completely unexpected and out of the blue. Paying them a visit, though with advance notice, to their location. Let me explain. The person who showed up on my property happened to be one of the previous owners. In fact, happened to be one of the people that helped build the cabin that I live in. In just our short, brief conversation, they provided me with so much information regarding the history of this cabin that I had to share it with you guys. It kind of blew me away and made me realize that I had made some false assumptions about this property. I had assumed that this cabin in some form had always been here since the property was first acquired from the state of Alaska. I knew that the property was originally part of the Homestead Act. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Homesteading Act, allowing individuals to lay claim to 160-acre parcels, provided that they live on the land and improve the land. In 1898, President William McKinley extended this to the District of Alaska. In the early 1900s, by the time Alaska had become a territory, less than 200 plots of land had been homesteaded. More would come after World War II, and by the time the Homesteading Act was retired in the 1980s, less than 3,500 homesteads had been claimed in Alaska, and the total land granted to those homesteaders equaled just less than 1% of Alaska's land mass. This property was acquired in the 1960s from the state of Alaska, but I had always assumed that this cabin in some form or another was part of that original settlement. And it turns out that I was incorrect. In order for an individual to have obtained the full 160 acres that was being offered by the state of Alaska, they had to meet certain requirements. The individual who originally made the claim on this 160 acres did not meet those requirements, and the property footprint was reduced to 5 acres. Now, my assumption was that this cabin was part of that original building that he built on. And he did build a structure, but I don't know if he just didn't reside in the structure, set up residency in the state of Alaska as he was supposed to, or what transpired that made him lose the full 160 and have it reduced to 5 acres. My assumption was that the Arctic entry was the original cabin. It turns out I was wrong. The original structure that was here on the property burnt to the ground, and this cabin came afterwards. This cabin came with the second set of owners. I don't know if it burnt down while it was in their possession or prior to them obtaining this property, but I do know that the Arctic entry, the room in which I'm standing right now, came after the main part of the cabin. As their family grew, they needed to create a master bedroom space, and so this room became it. Turns out that this room was built with telephone poles that had been taken down along the Richardson Highway from Valdez to Glen Allen. And I knew they were telephone poles because I could see the creosote in them. They're all pretty much uniform in size from one end of the log to the next, or to the other end. But I just assumed that this was first and the rest of the cabin was second, but that's not the case. If you're finding this video useful or entertaining, please remember to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. I'd love to know your thoughts. The cabin itself, including this room, was built by individuals that built the Alaska pipeline. The pipeline itself didn't actually start construction until the mid-70s, and the first oil went out of Valdez in 1977. But there was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be put in before that. And so the individuals who were working on the pipeline were welcome to stay here on this property, and they also needed a place to lay their heads at night and be sheltered from the elements. And so that's where the other outbuildings came from. The bunkhouse and the foam yurt in the back of the cabin were built by the pipeline surveyors and workers of the early 70s. And so just knowing the history that this cabin has, knowing that it was one of the first cabins built in the area, that it's still standing today, and that it was built by the hands of the individuals who helped build the Alaska pipeline, that is some history to be cherished. And I'm so thankful that this cabin, didn't need to be torn down, and that I'm able to help maintain it and keep this part of history alive. To me, that just makes this cabin that much more special, and I'm very thankful to be part of its history. One of the other things that she told me about was because her husband was working on the pipeline, that there was a lot of times that he and his fellow workers were not here. And so it was just her and her kids for a good number of those years. And during those years, they didn't have electricity out here at the property, and they didn't have access to running water. So they had no indoor bathroom. They were using the outhouse. And it was only years later that they eventually brought in the electricity, and that they had installed the kitchen counter that is currently in the kitchen. And I'm not sure if it originally had a sink in it or not. I don't think it did, because, as she said, they didn't have any access to water. But I could be wrong. She also told me that they had a couple large dogs here at the cabin. And the dogs were known for chasing bears off the property. But their dogs used to love to go behind the cabin into the woods. And one night their dog had encountered a bear, or they assume was a bear, off in the woods. It woke them from their sleep because it sounded like a woman screaming. They ran out, the dog came back, and after that night, she said the dog would never go off into the woods again. The bear was enough to scare that dog. Luckily, the dog was not injured. But it, does remind me that I really don't have any business going into the woods. And not that I really planned on it anyhow, but I know there have been a few of you that have been concerned about me walking off into the woods by myself or with Kenai. Well, first off, Kenai's never allowed out of my eyesight. He's on a lead, and he's on a lead so that he doesn't wander off into the woods. And he's on a lead only when I'm in his presence. Now, I do walk Kenai, but we don't go walking in the woods here. So he does get exercise. But nonetheless, I have no business being in the woods. And so I just wanted to know that I am very cautious with what I do here at the property. And as you've seen, I'm always carrying a sidearm with me. And I do know how to use my sidearm. I do practice with my sidearm. So I do plan on meeting with her in the future and being able to look over all the photographs that she has of this cabin being built and their time here at the cabin, and hearing all the stories she has to share. And hopefully she'll allow me to film that so that I can share it with everyone. But I was fascinated by what she had to say. In the meantime, before I can go meet with anybody, I need to go eat some dinner. So let's head over to the kitchen and I'll show you what I got cooking up. So I'm in the middle of a power outage. Yeah, the lights might come on while I'm in the middle of cooking. But it is really windy outside. It has been windy all day today. It's a good thing I don't need power to cook, but I do need light for you to be able to see me. And I don't have a flash for my camera. I guess that's one thing I need to purchase. What I was saying before the lights went out was that I was watching Creative Lori the other day, and she has a recipe on there for making basically a Taco Bell crunch wrap. And I was watching Not So Remote Alaska, and both of them live well within their means. And like myself, they seem to be very frugally minded. And it got me to be thinking about using what I have on hand, especially as I'm approaching my next grocery haul. That will probably be happening, I think, within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And the other thing that I started thinking about was Mike's comments that he's always leaving below about Taco Bell and 7-Eleven. And I started thinking about one of my favorite dishes from Taco Bell. So I'm going to show you today how you can very easily make a Mexican pizza, which Taco Bell had taken off their menu recently. I believe they're bringing it back as a permanent item. But if you want to save yourself the trouble of going to Taco Bell, let me show you how you can very easily make one at home. And so we're going to start out with just our basic ingredients. To make our Mexican pizza, we are going to need 2 flour tortillas, some oil for frying, a 1/4 pound of ground beef, or you could leave it out and go vegetarian, some refried beans, some enchilada sauce, a 1/4 cup of grated cheddar cheese, some diced tomatoes and green onions, as well as some spices. Here I have 1/2 tablespoon of ground cumin, a teaspoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of oregano, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground white pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of marjoram, and some salt to taste. And I'm just going to go ahead and start frying up my ground beef. And we're going to get that cooking up, and I'm going to go ahead and just put in my spices. You see I'm not dumping the plate over completely because I don't actually want all that white pepper. Go ahead and get this mixed in. Now typically you would fry up your meat before you throw in your spices, and you would just add a little bit of moisture to spread those spices around. But I live on the edge, I guess, and I am hungry. It's one of the bad parts about cooking when you're hungry is you don't really think things through all the way. It's not going to hurt anything to throw the spices in early. It's just that they're not going to distribute as evenly had I waited until the ground beef was cooked through, and then if I added some water to help carry those through the crumbles of beef. And you can drain off all of this excess oil if you prefer. I personally am not going to do that. I'm going to just let those absorb right into my tortillas. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take this off the heat. I'm going to set the meat aside for a moment, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to fry up the flour tortillas. And you're going to want to move this around because you do not want it left sitting in one spot where it could potentially burn. And you could turn the heat down. You know, that's an option too, but you also want to keep that heat high enough to keep that oil hot enough to cook, but not so hot that it burns. I'm just going to drain that on a paper towel. I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit more oil. And my skillet is extremely hot now. So I'm going to go ahead and actually turn the heat off. And I'm going to pick up that lid after I get done cooking. All right, go ahead and throw that tortilla in there. While that is finishing to cook, I'm going to go ahead and spread my refried beans onto my tortilla. Next, I'm going to add some of our seasoned ground beef. I'm going to throw in a little bit of the cheese. And I'm going to pour on just a little bit of that enchilada sauce. Not too much, just a little. I'm going to throw my tortilla back on top, my hot tortilla that has just come off the heat. And throw that on, and then this is actually going to go right back into the skillet. And the skillet has been turned off, by the way. And throw that in there. Now on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and just drizzle on some of the enchilada sauce. I'm going to go ahead and pour on the cheddar cheese. The skillet is off, but it is still hot. Then just go ahead and add your chopped tomatoes and green onions. Cover with a lid, and the residual heat will help to melt that cheese. The reason I have the tin foil on my lid is for that reflective properties. Sometimes it's for easy cleaning, but a lot of times I'll do that when I want that heat to reflect back down. And I want as much of the reflective properties as possible to go back down towards the food. So that's why I cover my lids in tin foil. Now, I'm going to let that steam itself. That'll melt the cheese. And then I'm going to have myself a nice, crunchy Mexican pizza for dinner. Again, I apologize for the power outage. Hopefully I'll be able to finish editing this video and get it up in time. So I hear you, Jim. I know my videos have been late, but what can you do when the power goes out? So I will do my best to get this uploaded and out tomorrow. In the meantime, I appreciate everyone watching, and until then, stay safe and take care. Enjoy these outtakes. Wow, that sun is bright. Can you see me? Like, now you see me, now you don't. I might as well be a ghost.
And action.
I'll just stand here and cook behind me. And when Kenai wants my attention, this is what he does with his biscuit.